G'day, I'm Steve Starling and welcome to Squidgy Secrets Part 2, Beyond the Basics. By now a lot of you have probably already watched the first production in this series, Squidgy Secrets Part 1, The Basics. That instructional presentation dealt with the absolute fundamentals of fishing with soft plastics such as the Blue Fox Squidgies that my mate Bushy and I have designed specifically to suit Aussie fish. In Part 1 we dealt primarily with rigging, presenting and working squidgies to catch southern estuary species, fish like flathead, brim and estuary perch. In this second instalment we're going to expand your horizons a little bit, take on some new species, travel to the tropical north of the country and in particular show you some of the tackle and the rigs that we use to effectively fish our squidgy soft plastics. A little bit later in the show, Bushy will be joining me, but right now I'm here with my good mate Ian Barra Miller, who builds some of the best fishing rods in the world and also helped to design many of the items in the squidgy range, particularly the spinnerbaits that we'll be showing you a little bit later in this episode as well. Now we're going to go after some barra and some Saratoga today here on Corroboree Lagoon in the Northern Territory. We're looking forward to it, aren't we, mate?
We sure are, mate, and it's a great day and we're in good hands too because we're being guided by Scotty Eccles, Darwin based for the last 6 or so years, guiding professionally and one of the premier guides in the territory. So, mate, we're ready when you are.
Fire up, Scott.
This picturesque body of water is part of the extensive Mary River system in the Northern Territory, east of Darwin. During the dry season, it consists of a string of waterholes, two of the largest and best known of which are Corroboree Lagoon and Shady Camp. As well as being great fishing spots, the Mary's waterholes offer visitors spectacular scenery and a whole host of top-end wildlife. But it's the underwater life we're most interested in. We've chosen to kick off here in Corroboree by casting a few standard squidgy jigs along the outside edges of the fringing lily pads, and we don't have to wait long for a bit of action, even if it's not the Barra or Saratoga we were hoping for.
Good tarpon.
Geez, they jump a bit more than brim, don't they? The same size as a good brim. Yeah. Beautiful fish. Oop. There we go.
Nice release.
Big at that.
Yes.
Nice billabong barra. Mate, that was just on that slow wind again.
Yeah, just a slow, steady wind, was it?
Dropping in the pockets. Just a slow wind.
Oh, nice fish, mate. Oh, I might even get out the enviro net for that one, mate.
That was more like it, wasn't it?
Oh, yeah. That's nice when he climbed on.
He did.
That's what it's all about. What colour squidgy are you on there, mate?
Yeah, it's the Lumo colour,
The neon.
the neon, yep. In the fish.
What I've gone as well. It's a good fish, mid-70s, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a nice one for here, I think.
Pushing 80.
Do you reckon, Scott? Pretty good one for this area?
Yeah, it'd be nice for this time of year, mate. It's cold water.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Let's have a look at him. Grab him out, Ian. And
Squidgy barra bait caster.
look at that. Wow, beautiful golden coloured
Aren't they
fish,
beautiful
isn't it?
colours?
And he's just hooked there in the hinge of the jaw.
Geez, I'll tell you what, after getting a few of those tarpon biting the lure, it's a different kettle of fish when the real one jumps on.
He was in close to cover there, wasn't he?
Yeah, just right in one of those clear pockets amongst the lily
So
pads.
you're getting it in there, not letting it sink very far and just a
That's
steady
right.
sort of
Yeah,
retrieve.
yeah, there's a lot of weed stems and
Yeah.
lilies in there, so you can't let it sink too far, but just a nice slow wind. And yeah, it's developing into a bit of a pattern, I think, mate.
Let's get him back in the
Let's
water.
Yeah, I've seen that.
Righto.
Despite the obvious effectiveness of the neon-coloured squidgy fish he started out with, Ian has listened to Scott Eccles' advice and decided to swap colours to something even brighter. He starts by loop knotting a pink and silver painted squidgy fish head jig to his 15 kilo nylon leader. Ian uses a 4 or 5 turn uni knot tightened short of the jig's eye to create the loop. This will enhance the action of the lure.
Snugging it down, I just want to tighten it up and leave it as a loop.
Next, Ian selects a hot pink killer tomato squidgy fish tail in the number 5 size and fits it carefully onto the jig, measuring it up first to make sure it lays nice and straight.
Pink one.
Pink.
Pink. Oh, well done.
Man said to use pink. How about that? Rule number 1. Fishing guide says to use a colour, just use it.
As the sun gets higher, the fish tuck closer to shade and cover, so reasonably accurate casting is fairly important when you're working the weed beds and lily edges like this. Luckily, there's nearly always something interesting to aim at on a top-end billabong, and that tends to keep your casting focused.
So how long did it take you to train this crocodile, Steve? What's that? Saratoga, eh?
Yeah, it looks like one. Oh,
It's
nice
pretty hard.
fish. That's a big Saratoga.
Well, when the guide says put a pink one on,
Put a pink one on. It's working well for you. That is a lovely Saratoga. Yeah, I'll need him for you. Thanks. Where is he? Ian?
right up, you ready?
Oh, what a beautiful fish. A little bit further up. Sorry, mate. Okay, I got it. Oh,
That's a nice one, isn't
thumping
it?
Saratoga.
It's Larry Treves really doing the job, isn't it?
Oh, geez, they're a bit toothy for that, aren't they? I might
Are they?
slip my finger. Yeah, no, I'm right.
Look at
That. You get the lure out, mate.
corner of the jaw again there.
You're just working those weed pockets, aren't you?
Yeah, I'm just dropping it in any little gap between the lily pads there and just slow rolling it out, just a nice slow wind. And it's certainly
Magnificent fish. They're just a living fossil, the old Saratoga. Gorgeous. Let's measure him up. Just on nearly 70
nearly 70,
centimetres,
yep.
68, 69 centimetres of Saratoga. Squidgy fishing at its best, mate. He pulled a bit of line off you there too, didn't he?
He did. Oh, they're so deep in the body they can really pull hard when they get on their
Very
side.
powerful,
Like that.
get a lot of purchase.
Yeah.
Let's get him back in the water. I'll put him in over here for you. Off you go, mate. Beautiful.
Although Ian had nailed a couple of lovely fish along the edges, the bite was shutting down now as the sun got higher, and we figured a move was in order. Scott had another spot in mind, one with denser cover for the fish. And although it was a bit of a run, there's always plenty to look at when you're cruising these wonderful top-end waterholes.
Ian and I are kicking off by throwing completely unweighted squidgies right back here into the lily pads. We've just got squidgy fish and squidgy shad tails on wide gape worm hooks, and we've got no other weight on there whatsoever. We're using gel spun line and a fairly strong, about 15 kilo leader, and we're just hoying it right back in there. We don't care whether we hit the water or not, because the way we've got them rigged up, they're fairly snag resistant. You can just pull them through and over the leaves and drop them into the little patches of water. Getting a fish out, it's going to be no easy task. And then a little bit later we'll start working the outside edges here with some of Ian's squidgy spinnerbaits. This is a fun way to go fishing.
You reckon getting a fish out is going to be tough, mate? I'm finding it hard just getting the lure into the water.
This is a highly visual and very exciting way to fish, and the first thing you need to train yourself to do is to throw that lure deep into snaggy country that you'd normally avoid.
The boys are in here, all right.
Weedless, unweighted soft plastics open up all sorts of opportunities in places like this, which are effectively out of reach to more conventional techniques. And when you see a fish move like this, there's nothing to stop you getting a cast straight onto it.
Got him. Oh, got one. Yeah, I watched him eat it. It's only a little one. That was great. I saw him actually come out of the water chasing something else, and I just threw it in there and let it sink, and I saw him swim over, eat it, and I just let him turn his head down. And Bob's your uncle. Pinned him through the bottom jaw in that magic little spot. Only a little one. Ooh, I'll get you to throw him back over the side for me, Ian. Thanks, mate.
There's a lot more to what we're doing here than just mechanically casting and cranking. We're working those unweighted plastics every centimetre of the way, crawling them over lily pads and around stems, letting them drop into likely gaps and holes, and jiggling the rod tip to impart additional action. It's active, thinking fishing, and it's also lots of fun.
That unweighted squidgy is working like a charm.
Look at this croc coming in.
Oh, you can hear the fish splashing.
He's my barra, not yours.
Look at that, he's dived down through the weed. They're amazing. They're just in this tiny little bit of a creek mouth here. It's just enough to hold a bunch of fish. They're only small barra. But that unweighted gold squidgy shad that you rigged up earlier, that is really doing the goods. Swing him around here and just look. The colour of these barra, actually, you know, it's quite interesting. The golds in the tail are quite similar to some of the golds in the flanks of that little barra.
They're really pretty little fish, aren't they? Just hang on for that for a second. We might have a look at that.
No worries.
Put him back. Oh, look at this croc here.
Yeah, you better get him back in quick.
over that way.
Yeah.
Don't go that way, not that way.
Here comes the croc. Do you want to just pull that off the hook, Ian, and just show the folks how to rig the unweighted squidgy on one of these wide gape worm hooks?
Yeah. It's a good trick to know. Okay, well I'll just take this lure right off the hook and I'll show you from scratch how to rig it. This is a squidgy shad that we've been using today, and it's got a great action when it's rigged weightless like this on a worm style hook. You can see that hook's a very strange shape. It's got a little kink in the shank right up near the eye, and that's important. What's going to happen is that hook's going to sit right in the soft plastic, just like that, so only the eye's coming out of the front of the lure, and only the hook point will be coming out of the front of the lure, and that shank there will act as a keel. So to actually thread it in, you put the hook in the front of the shad like that, and straight out underneath the chin of the shad. Thread the hook right on and then actually turn it around. And you'll see that'll actually lay nice and flat like that. Now we've got to put the point of the hook in the shad as well. If you have a look, and you'll be able to see roughly where that point should go in. So you actually turn the lure over, put it in the belly of the lure, and straight up through the back of the lure like that, out the top. And there you have it. So the hook's actually quite nicely in the lure there. This front part here, that kink in the shank's going to hold it, and the hook point, whilst it's exposed, is actually sitting on the back of the lure, and that makes it very weedless. And you can also cast it into snags as well. You shouldn't hook anything until a fish grabs it, and when that happens, you just give it a little time to make sure the fish has got it in its mouth before you strike, and you do strike the fish. And that should be all you need to do. So they're still biting here. We'll see if we can get another one.
Mate, I missed about 4 while you were rigging that one. To get it in,
Oh, well.
I'm not doing very well at all hooking these.
The way we've been retrieving these today has been with quite a slow retrieve too. Twitching the rod, making the lure sort of kick in the water like a wounded fish. Those of you that are familiar with a walking the dog type retrieve, you can do the same thing with these as well. And that'll kick them through the water and let them sit and start to dive, and often that's when you'll get bitten. Steve, this is also another sort of fishing you couldn't do with an overhead outfit either, is it? You need this the spin tackle to do this sort of thing.
You do, because the lures that you're ending up with are fairly light. I don't know what just the tail and a hook would weigh, but it's probably only about 3 or 4 grams at most. It'd be very, very hard to throw on a bait caster, but a breeze to throw off one of these Shimano threadline reels on our Barra spin rods.
Now, don't get the idea that squidgies only work on these little lagoon barra. Take a look at this beauty that our mate Andrew E.T. Eddinghausen landed recently while tweaking a weighted squidgy in another top-end river system.
Well, I've been waiting for this big fish for ages on the fly, but unfortunately it wasn't coming, so I thought I'll put a soft plastic on and have a bit of a toss. As soon as I did, right along the edge here, I hooked him into a big fish. I actually saw it when it first came up. The size of this fish, and this one. I'm just using a little bit of thumb just to bring her back. Woo! Took a squidgy. A lovely little squidgy. Not bad, is it, eh? And that's what they can expect now.
Meanwhile, back on the Mary, Ian and I are still having a ball playing in the lilies.
Keep winding, winch him out, winch him out.
He made a big mistake and jumped. As soon as he jumped, I just started winching and he never really got his head back in the water. Oh dear.
That was a good job. Good job.
I'm pretty happy with that. Squidgy's gone, but I don't care. That's a nice little Saratoga. Oh, aren't they great looking fish? Fantastic. He was right back in there and he shot straight up out of the water and I just started cranking as fast as I possibly could with that 4,000 sustain reel. And I'm using one of our 6.5 foot Squidgy Barra spin rods that Ian designed, and mate, you can pull on them pretty hard, can't you?
You sure can.
Listen, unroll the Environet brag mat there, and we'll just measure this one and show the folks how the brag mat works. It's a nice little feature from Dave Irvine, who makes the Environets. Very fish-friendly equipment that he makes. Yeah, these are great things, these brag mats. They go right up to 1.2 metres. This fish is nowhere near that big. 52 centimetres, as you can see here. This is the 50 centimetre mark. Then it starts to get really specific after about 55, because that's the minimum legal length of barra in a lot of places, right up to 1.2 metres. It's a nice smooth surface to lime on. It's not going to do the fish any harm.
Yeah, and you can also write on them, Steve. You can actually write down the length of a particular fish, if it was a big one, where you caught it, what the date was, and it really does become a brag mat then. Some guys actually hang them up on their wall and they can see all the big fish they've caught over the years.
That's the ones we're after, the Saratoga. Get him back into the water. Spear him in, he's off like a shot. There are lots of exciting new products in the Squidgy range this year. Keep an eye out for them. But I just wanted to briefly show you two that I find particularly exciting. One of them is the Squidgy fish tail in two larger sizes than we currently make, the number 7 and number 8 sizes. Now these are really going to appeal to things like big snapper, mulloway, big barramundi, cobia, all sorts of goodies. And to go with them, and in fact to go with all the Squidgy tails, we've come up with the Squidgy resin head jig heads. These are fantastic. They've got a small lead insert set in a resin head, so it's actually quite a bit lighter than a full-on lead head, and has a much more controlled and slower sink rate. Great for fishing around snags or where you want the lure to hang in the water as it sinks a little bit slower than it does on the standard jig head. And it's built on one of these big, strong VMC Barbarian hooks. You can really pull hard on those when you hook that whopper. So if you're thinking big fish, check these out, the Squidgy fish and the resin-headed jig.
Starlo, that's not a squidgy.
What do you mean?
This is a squidgy.
I told you
A
not to
blue
bring
water
it out.
squidgy.
Oops. We can't tell you about that. It's part of the blue water Squidgy range that is going to take the world by storm, but it's still under development. Keep an eye out for it, you idiot.
Yeah.
On the spinnerbait?
Yeah, it's on the spinnerbait. Another toga, I think.
Yeah. Just that deeper edge, eh?
Yeah, it's just doing some probing as we were moving, actually. I was just dropping a couple of quick...
Oh, nice one. I'll net him for you, mate.
That Enviro.
Nice toga. I'll grab the Enviro net. Oh. Oh, lovely fish. There we go, straight into the Environet. These things are just so good for fish, these Environets. And they're not hard to use if you use them properly. Bring the fish to the net rather than chasing the fish around with the net.
I know we use them a lot down home where we come from, Steve, but up here, they're still a good net for barra and big fish up here.
Yeah, well, these big ones like this are great for barra. And it's just so much kinder to the fish. They don't do any damage to their slime coat or their fins or anything because of the mesh. Ooh, just fell out. Just run us through the design principles behind the Squidgy spinnerbaits, Ian, because they're your design. What did you want to achieve with it?
Well, I wanted to achieve a spinnerbait that was a little bit more suited to Australian fish than all the other spinnerbaits that we've used here, which have basically been designed for American bass fishing in shallow water. You know,
Fish with large mouths, a bit like that.
bit like that.
Isn't he a beauty?
He is.
I'll pop him back in.
Yep.
What I like about the Squidgy spinnerbaits, apart from the fact that they've got squidgies on the tail, so they're swimming and working all the time, unlike the shredded skirts, which are nice, but we've just come up with something a little bit different. You really spent a lot of time making sure that these things would helicopter on the drop, didn't you?
That's right. The arm length is different to your other spinnerbaits. It's got a short top arm and a longer bottom arm. I just think this makes the lure more accessible to our fish, and it certainly allows them to helicopter perfectly every single time. As soon as you cast it and let it sink, it'll helicopter. If you pause your retrieve and let it sink, it'll helicopter each time too. Most spinnerbaits you'll probably get 4 out of 5 times you drop it, it won't spin. But these do it very well, and you get hit an awful lot on the drop with these lures.
And that's really good in this kind of country, isn't it? Because we can throw them right back in there over the top of the lily pads, pull them across the shallow stuff, and then when you hit a little pocket of deeper water, you can just let them helicopter down into it, and a lot of times you'll get a hit doing that.
Yeah, and you can wind them fast if you wanted to. They're extremely stable at all speeds, and they run quite deep if you want them to. You can actually slow your retrieve down, and the blade will still work, but the lure will start to dive. So, you know, when we're fishing at your average sort of bank that drops away, you can actually slow your retrieve down and reach the next break line, speed it up over the weeds that might be there, and then let it dive down again while retrieving all the time.
Of course, when you think spinnerbaits in Australia, you think Australian bass, and that's where we're going to take you next, down to Somerset Dam, a couple of 1,000 kilometres from here, not too far from Brisbane. And I'm going to join up with Bushy, and we're going to chase some big Australian bass on Squidgy, so don't go away. Mate, I reckon that little...
Lake Somerset lies on the upper Brisbane River, an hour or two's drive from the city, and it's typical of the dozens of man-made impoundments around the country that have been successfully stocked with a variety of wonderful Australian native fish. The big prizes at Somerset include golden perch and Mary River cod, but the species that's drawn Bushy and me here, along with our good mate Craig Simmons, is the mighty Australian bass. Trouble is, we haven't exactly picked ideal conditions. We've come on the tail of drought-breaking rains and unseasonably cool weather, and it's still raining. Catching bass today isn't going to be easy.
Oh yes!
Let's put a bend in the squidgy rod.
You bet, and it's put a smile on my dial. Yeah, nice looking fish. Well, there you go. We could see them on the sounder, and it was just a matter of working on the fish. It's not the best of weather today, and we've had hundreds of millimetres of rain in the last few days. A lot of water's run into this system. It's probably lowered the temperature a bit. It's certainly dirtied it up, and it's shut the fish down a little bit. But if you can find them and work on them with the squidgies, you can still catch them, and that's a pretty good start. Righto, mate. Off you go.
We're working water between about 7 and 10 metres deep, concentrating on areas where the depth sounder and the presence of all these cormorants or shags indicates concentrations of life. We've even pinpointed some of the better spots with marker buoys attached to weights. Trouble is, the sounder shows most of the bass sulking right on the bottom, where they can be very hard to tempt.
We've got about 27 feet or 8 metres of water here, and we're marking a few fish and quite a bit of bait, which is probably bony brim. There's a lot of bony brim, which are a little bait fish here in Somerset. Now, the fish don't look particularly active, the bass. We're just seeing the odd line through the middle of the bait fish schools. What I'm going to do, I've rigged up one of our number 3 squidgy fish in the Gary glitter colour on one of our lead head jigs. That's about a 5 or 6 gram head. And I'm going to drop it in there and get it right down to the bottom. Just make a short cast. We're drifting with the wind, so I'll just make a short cast. We're drifting that way, so I'll throw them back that way. I'll let it get all the way to the bottom, and I'll be able to tell when it reaches the bottom because the line will go slack. It's a little bit hard to tell when you're drifting away from it like this, so every now and again you can just put your finger on it and just let the line come tight. I can feel that that's still sinking, so I'll let it go a bit more. It's on the bottom now. I'll close the bail arm, wait for it to come tight, and then I'm just going to slowly wind. I'm not going to do anything all that exciting with the rod tip, just hold it flat and just a slow roll until I've lifted it a couple of metres clear of the bottom. Stop, open the bail arm again and let it go back down. And what I like to do sometimes is just let that line run through my fingers as it goes back down, because sometimes the fish will hit it on the way back. And you might see that in the line, but on a breezy day like this you might also feel it with your fingers, just like a little bite, and then you can close the bail arm and strike. It's a pretty deadly technique for bass, particularly when they're shut down like they are at the moment. Oh yes, that's got a bit of weight to it. After all those little plucks I was getting, suddenly a fish has just climbed on there. Oh, that's a good fish. Oh. Oh, it was a million miles away then. I was starting to daydream a little bit, but I just went into a slow roll with that jig, and that fish just nailed it. I'm only using 4-pound braid here, platypus braid, and I'm using one of these Squidgy Spin 7-foot rods, which is really a brim weight rod, but it's perfect. Oh, nice fish. Look at the condition they carry in here. There's obviously so much tucker in here with the bony brim and everything else. You'd just be a good fish. Oh, look at that. What a beauty. That is a lovely fish. It just goes to show, even on a tough day like this, and this lake has risen about 1.5 meters in the last 24 to 48 hours. There's been a heck of a lot of rain, and we're still getting some this morning. Conditions are not good. It's really muddied up in here, and I don't think the fish like it very much. They're pretty shut down, but that's what often happens, and you can't always pick the conditions you have to fish in, especially in, say, a tournament or something. And if you're willing to just work away there and get the lure down into them and just keep working it through them, they just can't resist something like that number 3 squidgy fish in the Gary Glitter on one of our unpainted ball head jigs, and it just pinned him right there in the front of the top lip. I'm pretty happy about that. I'll put him in the live bait well. We'll see if we can get a couple more. Got a beautiful big live well here in Simo's boat. So we'll put him in there just to see if we were fishing a tournament and see if we can get another one as well. Oh yes. Woohoo! Oh, that's good. What a good feeling. We started marking those fish on the sounder, and they just looked a bit more positive and a bit higher in the water. And I went to a slightly faster slow roll, a medium roll if you like, and straight away a really active fish has just nailed that soft plastic. Oh yeah. Not a big fish, but I'm pretty happy to see him anyway. Look at that. Oh, they're spectacular fish, whether you catch them in rivers or whether you catch them in dams. Australian bass are just one of our great sport fish, and they were just made for the squidgy. And on light gear like this, they're an absolute ball. I'm just using 4-pound braided line on one of our 7-foot Squidgy Spin rods, which is really brim weight gear, and a very light leader. I'm using about 1.5 meters to 2 meters of just 3 kilo monofilament line here, just to keep everything really fine so that it sinks down nicely through the water and has the ultimate in deception and finesse, and that's what it's all about on tough days like this. I'll get him in the live bait well.
Yep.
Yes. Oh, well done, Bushy.
Yeah. That's pretty good timing, Steve. Straight away, as soon as you got yours in, you've just been creamed. Same thing, I just let it hit the bottom, started the slow wind, and you'd imagine that little tail just kicking on the way up, and he slammed that. Absolutely slammed it.
Well done, mate.
I had to do something, I was going to be walking home.
Looks like a good fish too.
Not a bad fish.
Now, what line are you on, Bushy?
I'm just on a bit of 4-pound fire line.
Yep.
And I've got a slightly heavier trace than you have.
Nice fish.
And that may be why you've been kicking my butt a bit too. You've got 3 and this is my first one.
Oh, I'll see if I can knock it off for you.
Yeah, thanks for that. He's good at that. You take a while to knock my fish off the line.
Oh, and I noticed you went to the Gary Glitter fish a bit like I'm using, mate.
Yeah, that's a very strange thing. I mean, we do have a number of different colours, and we certainly use all of those colours on various occasions, but if your mate catches 3 on one colour, it's a really good idea to go to your squidgy box and get one of those out, because they do seem to show a preference on certain days, don't they, Steve?
Yeah, and isn't it interesting how similar that Gary Glitter colour is to the bass colour? And they are a cannibalistic fish, like most predators. They'll eat little bass. They're in there eating bony brim as well. But we've often found that, haven't we? If you sort of match the lure to the watercolour and to the fish and to the forage, you're going to do a lot better.
Yeah, there's just something about that, and certainly today that particular colour really has done something for us. And it is a pretty tough day. There's certainly been people here fishing with other equipment and other lures, and I'll tell you what, the only thing that's caught a fish today that we've seen has been a squidgy.
Yes. These things can fight.
It hit hard, didn't it?
Hit real hard and it started peeling lines straight away. Colour down there. Oh, it's a big one. Look at that for a bass.
That's a good bass.
Oh, yes.
Did you take that on that same straight line?
Still using the same slow roll, but I've probably sped it up just a fraction, and part of that is my own excitement, I think, through being able to see the fish on the sounder. They just looked to me like they were going to bite. They come up a little bit higher in the water, and that's always a good sign that they're moving around. And it's been tagged, which is really interesting. They've got tagging programs up here in these Queensland dams, and it'll be interesting. We'll get the number off that later and find out when this fish was released and how big it was when it was released.
I'll tell you what, when you come out here on a pretty shut down day and you can get a couple of bass, big solid ones like that, I'll tell you what, you know a squidgy isn't a bad lure, Steve. I know yours. They're good fish though, aren't they?
Great fish. I'd like that pair during a session in one of the ABT bass tournaments.
And the thing is, you just persevered too. I mean, it took me a while to get my hook up, but you had to persevere a little bit. We had to just keep working away with those squidgies, keep having a bit of faith, and just keep working it through the fish. That's not a bad little session.
I am one happy camper, and there are dams all over Australia where you can come out and do this with your squidgies, and of course you can do it in rivers too. They don't just work in the still waters on the bass. They are a fantastic lure for catching bass, but vary the presentation and the lures you use to suit the conditions. If the fish are shut down, then slow down the action, use a bit of finesse, go to finer line, finer leader. When they get active, you can get more active, but you can catch them any day of the year. Okay, in the well he goes. What a beautiful fish.
With more squall lines of black cloud approaching and gradually blotting out our window of blue sky, we figured it was time to quit while we were ahead, release our keepers, and get the heck off the water before the heavens opened up once again.
Well, it's going to give me great pleasure to put these 2 big mama bass back into Lake Somerset, and you can let your 2 little ones go too, Bushy.
It'll give me a lot of pleasure to let these little tiny Somerset bats go as well.
Oh mate, they're not bad fish anyway. Slip them back in.
Bye, boys.
Now, I put my 46 centimetre fork length one back. That's a nice fish. Off she goes. And this big one with the tag in it, and I've taken the tag number, and I'm going to find out when it was released, who caught it, and how big it was when it was let go. It's 48.5 to the fork now. A really, really nice fish, over 50 centimetres total length. Okay, and I'll get her back into the water and make sure she's all right. That beautiful big squidgy caught bass. And I tell you what, I don't think I'd have caught too many fish today on anything other than a squidgy. It was pretty tough fishing, but when you end up with a couple like this, it's all worthwhile. She's ready to go. Good stuff. Well, up to this point in the squidgy instructional videos, we've mostly concentrated on southern species that require a fair bit of delicacy and finesse. Well, now for something entirely different. I'm anchored in the mouth of the Jackson River on the western side of Cape York Peninsula, and we're about to grab our squidgy gear and head offshore to do some jigging on the tropical reefs. Little Spanish flag, one of the Janid clan. Pretty much constant action when you're bouncing squidgies along the bottom in reefy water. Ah, it's a little coral trout. And also to throw them at some fast-moving pelagic fish. And straight away, there's a fish onto it. This should be fun.
I'm up on the western side of Cape York Peninsula fishing with my favourite tropical mothership operation, Greg and Jenny Bethune's Carpentaria Seafaries. I'm headed out to sea on the Gulf today in one of their skiffs with my good mate Michael Hewlin. We'll kick off by anchoring up, putting a little burley in and bouncing some squidgies on the bottom. But as always, I'll take a moment to measure the tail I've chosen alongside the jig head and make sure I feed it on nice and straight, with the hook point emerging on the midline of the plastic's back.
Well, we've come about a kilometre offshore and anchored up in 7 or 8 metres of water over some broken reef and sand. These little patches often hold a mixture of both reef fish and pelagic species. Now, I've put a little bit of burley in. That's not always necessary, but it doesn't hurt when you're in a new area just to throw a little bit of chopped up burley in to see what's around. And now I'm going to drop my squidgy fish down there to the bottom. Got him on 9-gram lead head jig because there's not a lot of run here today. I'll just throw it over the side and let it go all the way to the bottom. What I'm going to do is work the water all around the boat, but I'll start with the stuff right underneath. Okay, that's on the bottom now, and I'll just bounce it up and down a couple of times, lifting it half a metre to a metre off the bottom and then letting it swim back down again. Once I've bounced it a few times, I'll just retrieve it up through mid-water. And then next presentation, I'll make it in a slightly different area, make a short cast out there. Again, let it get all the way to the bottom. Doesn't take very long in this shallow water. That's on the bottom now. Just pick up the slack and bounce it along the seabed, just lifting and falling half a metre or a metre or so. I can fish the seabed all the way back until I'm nearly under the boat. And then what I like to do is retrieve it fairly rapidly up through the mid-water range. That's when you might pick up a big pelagic like a trevally or a mackerel or whatever. So you're really covering the water very effectively. It's a start, one of the little cod species, and you'll often find when you get to a reef and you start burleying and drop a few jigs over, you'll get the little stuff first. But even the activity that they generate, the vibrations and everything as you're pulling the small fish up through the water can bring bigger stuff in, so don't give up just because you catch a few small fish to begin with. Yeah. Oh, it's still not a big fish, but it's a little bit bigger. Oh, this is not a bad fish. I took my little piece of wire off. I actually got snagged and lost one. Oh, it's a shark. It goes to show. No bait on there, just a squidgy, so they obviously think it's the real McCoy. Look at that, nice corner of the jaw hook up, which is why he hasn't bitten me off. One of the little whaler species that are quite prolific up here. Need to be a little bit careful with these guys. They've got a mouthful of pretty sharp teeth. As you can see in there, he's got a pretty good set of teeth on him. He'd have bitten me off if he'd have swallowed it any deeper, but he's just got pinned in the corner of the jaw, luckily. Usually when you're reef fishing and sharks move in any sort of numbers, it's a pretty good time to move somewhere else, and that's what we might do.
Michael and I are heading back inshore towards the beach and the river mouth, where we've seen some interesting bird activity. As we get closer, it quickly becomes obvious that big predators are ripping into a school of massed baitfish right along the back of the beach. This is the sort of action that brings me back to the Cape year after year. I love it.
Do you want to go hookless? They were just cruising. Oh! Woohoo! This is fantastic. We're up here in about a metre of water on the sand flats, and there's a lot of bait fish. And I've put a little silver fox squidgy fish on and thrown it out there, and straight away a big queenie's jumped all over it. Sweltering here under the morning sun. Oh, and we've got queenfish just swimming around the boat here. Woo! Oh, he's taken some line. I'm just using 10-pound gel spun here, and I've got it on one of our Squidgy Barra spin rods. These are a 6.5 foot 2-piece rod. Just fantastic for this sort of thing. We call them the Squidgy Barra, but of course you can catch a whole lot more than just Barra on them. And I've got a 4,000 size Shimano reel on here. It's a wonderful outfit, nice and light. You can cast with it all day, and yet it has the authority to knock over some pretty big fish. It's made a couple of great jumps, and there he is. Oh, in that crystal clear water. We've drifted out probably into 1.5 meters of water now, maybe 2 meters, but I can still see the bottom. Great fighting fish, real acrobats, fast runners, but I love them because they don't tie you up for hours like a big GT or a giant trevally. You can knock these over even on this gear in 5 to 15 minutes. Oh. See the squidgy hanging out of the corner of his mouth there. Look at that. What a beautiful queenie. Oh, and what a great way to start the day. Throwing a squidgy into a school of those. Look at that, the tail's completely undamaged. So it just goes to show, squidgies are not only about fishing for fish that live down on the bottom and take fairly slow presentations. These big pelagics will also chase one down. And what I like about the squidgy is the fact that you don't have to retrieve it as quickly as some of the hard-bodied lures to get a strike from one of these pelagics. And being a single hook, it's got, oh, look how easily that came out with the single hook. And that tail will catch a couple more fish. It's not damaged at all. Righto, I'm going to get this bloke back in the water, swim him a little bit, make sure he's okay. Oh, just face his head up into the current. And he's starting to kick and get his strength back. He's pretty tired, so am I. He's going to be fine. There he goes. Off back to maraud those bait fish.
Speaking of bait fish, there are a couple more acres of them spread out down the back of the beach, and they're starting to attract a good deal of attention, with all sorts of predators moving in to take advantage of the seafood banquet.
Well, this looks promising. I'll just throw a squidgy out there. Let it sink a little bit, we're not in deep water here. And straight away, there's a fish onto it. As you saw, I didn't retrieve that particularly fast. I just gave it a bit of a jig and started a steady retrieve. And the fish has nailed it. It's coming at me. Woo, he's going to take off in a second. I get a jump here. Oh, I tell you what, the cloud cover has come over. It was bright sunlight half an hour ago. A little bit of broken cloud has rolled in and it's dropped the temperature about 3 or 4 degrees. It's made it a lot more pleasant day. I've actually stopped sweating for the first time this morning. This fish is going to have me sweating again. There he is. Whew, they're so erratic, sudden direction changes. One's not a jumper, or not yet. It's amazing how much stick you can put on them with these 6.5 foot squidgy Barra spin rods and just a light line. Woo! Really got to use that rod if they go under the boat. Just bury the rod in the water. And here he comes. Right in the point of the top jaw he's hooked. right there in the point of the jaw. That's going to come out very easily. He's only been out of the water a couple of seconds. This is going to be a nice healthy fish. Is he all right? Off he goes. I'm going to get another one. They're busting up over there. There's a big strip of these bait fish running right along the back of the beach here. They've all been concentrated in. They're being pushed out of the shallows by the falling tide, and there's just a wall of teeth and fins on the outside of them as the predators work the outside edge of the school. This is something that, well, I reckon any red-blooded fisherman, it certainly makes the blood pump to see this kind of thing happening. Oh, that's got to be a giant herring. That is just awesome. Or is it a mackerel? There's everything in here. I only just got the bail arm closed and this little mackerel nailed the squidgy. Oh, yeah, little fella. Look at him go! Woo-hoo! Oh, little mackerel. Oh, I was pretty lucky. I haven't got wire on. I've just got a nylon leader, but his teeth stayed away from the nylon. Back in. There's a big queenie. Okay, this is sight casting with a squidgy. Lob it in front of him and he eats it. It doesn't get much better than that. This is a great demonstration, you know. There would be literally millions of bait fish here along the beach. We've got predators hunting the edge, and you might think, what's the point in matching one of those bait fish? You've got a 1 in a million chance of getting a take, but not if you fish it just out on the edge of the school and make it look like a crippled one that's wandered out of the group. Straight away a fish just jumps all over it.
Some of the hunters are beginning to slow down a little now, their bellies no doubt full, but they're still cruising the edges of the bait school with malicious intent, while smaller predators dash in for their cut. This is flat sight fishing at its champagne best, and often you can literally pick your target before even making a cast. Just check this out.
It's a golden. I got him. Oh, just for something a little bit different. This one's a beautiful golden trevally. I saw them coming across the flats, 2 or 3 fish. It was a little hard to tell what they are. There's queenfish there as well. Dropped the squidgy in front of him and just jigged it a couple of times. And bingo, he's all over it. And that's a lovely, lovely golden trevally. Sight fishing with the squidgy on the flats for these things. Doesn't get too much better than that. Look at this. Here. What I love about these golden trevally is they've got no teeth, no spines, no scoots. They're just a dream when it comes to handling. You can tail them like that, and there it is. I changed to a larger squidgy fish in the silver fox because a fair few small trevally and queenies started to move in there, and I thought that by going for a bigger one I might be able to high grade, and it worked. Just scored that lovely golden trevally. Look at his mouth, they've got really rubbery lips and a mouth that actually shoots forward like a vacuum cleaner for sucking crustaceans and things off the bottom, but they'll also chase down baitfish and squidgies. I'll get him back in the water. They handle pretty well. Oh, he's got plenty of life in him. I'll just face him up into the current and away he goes. Well, that's given you a bit of an idea of what you can do with squidgies out in the open. It's not all about vertical fishing, slow presentations. You can catch fast-moving pelagic fish on them too. Queenies, trevally, tuna, mackerel, you name it, the sky's the limit.
Well, Bushy and I are a couple of 1,000 kilometres further south from where Starlo just enjoyed that amazing session on the flats of Cape York. But we're still in Queensland. In fact, we're at Lenthills Dam, a few hours drive north of Brisbane. And although it's in the middle of winter here in Queensland, we're looking forward to some pretty hot action, we hope, on the spinnerbaits today.
And these squidgy spinnerbaits are lethal pieces of gear. Now, I know you're their daddy. You've put a lot of work into these, Ian. Now, why are they fantastic?
Well, as you know, mate, spinnerbaits are a great lure for working right throughout the water column. You can fish them shallow near the surface and you can fish them deep. And with the squidgy spinnerbaits, we've worked in a lot of features into the design to make them just a little bit better for Australian fish.
Right, they helicopter down really well, they buzz well.
Yep, you can even make them dive if you wind them slowly. They'll still work and dive when you want to get down deep. So this looks pretty good round here. I reckon we should pretty much start.
I can't wait to have a go.
Because of their versatility, spinnerbaits are ideal searching tools when exploring new water, whether it be in a river or a lake. And that's exactly what Ian and Bushy are doing here, as neither of them has fished Lenthills Dam before. They're concentrating their efforts along the shoreline and any weed bed edges or pockets, using a variety of retrieves to effectively search the water column, and it doesn't take too long for this proven strategy to pay off.
Oh, and the light tackle, Bushy.
Yes, Barra.
Just slow rolling the very smallest spinnerbait right along the bottom there.
Well, we've literally been here about 5 minutes, so that's not too bad.
We had quite a few casts at the edge there without any luck. So.
Oh, nice fish too. Good solid fish. That's a pretty sexy looking spinnerbait too. I like that colour, that blue.
Yeah, that's the avocado colour, and it's been working really well in a whole lot of places. St Clair and Glenbourne, and even up north in the tropics on the Toga, they've been working well, that particular colour. So he's, I believe there's two really distinct year classes in this dam too. This class, and then there's a bigger one as well.
Bigger one?
Bigger one as well.
Let's get some more spinnerbaits in there. Now, wait a minute here, Ian. This is a bit sneaky. How come most of the spinnerbaits I've seen come in from the States have got a big skirty thing, and your cunning little one's got a little wriggly thing? What's the go with that?
Well, the go is the squidgy tail, Bushy, the squidgy factor. We know how much the fish like them on jigs, but they also love them when they're on a spinnerbait too. And so the whole squidgy spinnerbait concept, of course, is centred around the squidgy tails.
Right, and I suppose instead of getting a big mouthful of fluffy skirt that they're not used to, it's like a little shrimp or a prawn, so they actually get the hook straight in the mouth with
That's
that.
the idea. I think they're a lot more suited to our native fish and the size of their mouth, and I think also the way that they take the lure.
Oh, there you go. I'm going to put one of those on. Okay, let's see if we can get another one. What did you do with that thing? Was it helicoptering or just slowly?
Let it go right to the bottom and then just really slow
That's
rolling.
a little spinnerbait, I like that.
It climbed on beautifully. I'm thinking to kill a tomato in this brownie water. And
Lenthills is a lovely little lake with plenty of likely fish holding cover, much of it in the form of sunken timber, weed beds and large rafts of lily pads, all of which is prime squidgy spinnerbait territory.
yeah, with spinnerbaits, they're very weedless, so you can actually drop them in a little pocket like that, let them sink down behind weed if you want to, and then you can actually pop them out over the top of the weed or the snag and then drop them again straight away on the other side on the front of it, because the fish get right in amongst the weed there in the channels and they're expecting to find food in there, so you often get bit on the drop. When you cast in there, just get ready. This will be good. You can fish way, way, way back in the cover there. Just pull it through the weed, and if you don't catch a fish, you just pop it out and wind it back. And if you do catch a fish, lock up and wind like crazy.
Yep.
He's got you around the weeds there, mate.
Well,
You're clear
he's a
now.
monster, so I think I've got him. Got him out. Well, that was a little bit different technique to yours, Ian.
It was.
Yeah, next to those weeds, and a slow roll, I just threw right in hard in the bank under those sort of trees right on the edge, and a quick burn.
Okay.
Just a nice fast retrieve to have that blade really whirring, and the fish sort of have to make up their minds all of a sudden whether they want it or they don't.
You can wind these really fast, you know.
Yeah.
This design, they're very, very stable. You can crank them almost
Very
flat out
stable,
and they'll
so-
still sit in the water.
Yeah.
You can burn them really fast and they don't rise up too quick either. You can burn them really fast and then let them sink back down again.
All right, we'll chuck him in. Just another sneaky way to
Yeah.
use the old squidgy spinnerbait.
Yeah, they're
You
pretty
like
good
it.
for all these techniques.
So we can get another one in there. Yep. Oh, that's a better fish. Oh,
He's got a bit of get up and go.
yeah, he has. I think I've got him out past that weed. This one's got a bit of toe in it. Well, that's 2 and 3 casts.
I can see a pattern forming.
Yeah, there's a bit of a pattern forming there. And that's one of the things you have to keep your eye on too when you're fishing any sort of a lure, but with a spinnerbait
Oh
as well.
yeah, that's a nice one. That's one of those bigger class fish, I think.
That's better. Let's see if we can get him up
How
here.
heavy is your leader?
hopefully.
Oh, just heavy enough.
Made him. Yeah, once you get a bit of a pattern, it's very important to notice what you're doing with your lure, with your spinnerbait. If you've been bitten on a fast retrieve, well, just throw it back in there and do another fast retrieve like I just did with that one. Again, if you're bitten when you're on the drop, when it's slowly helicoptering down, try some more of that. So just keep your eye on what you're doing with your spinnerbaits, but that's a lovely little fat
It
fish.
is. I can see a nice little snag in there. I'm just going to try and sneak one.
Ian's got another cast right in on the bank, so I'm going to have to get this one back in the water quickly and have another cast. There you go, mate.
Well, I might be slow, but I'm not silly. I'm going to do the same as you, mate. Get down to that smaller one again and start cranking them out a bit quicker.
too. Keep that area back in mind. We mightn't have blasted them all out of that yet either.
It's nothing better than having a nice bite on a fast crank spinnerbait, is there? It's great stuff.
It's good stuff, isn't it?
Winding away and just go crunch.
And the other good thing about these, they're particularly weed resistant. The way you've got that arm just on that good angle, you can whack it right in there in the shallows. It's not many baits you can throw right in there like that and go over a log, drop it in, crank it.
There's another good thing about them too, you know. I reckon these outcast most other spinnerbaits by about 100%. So when you want to get the jump on your mate, just fire it way down there.
That's too far to cast. I don't know why you'd want to cast way down there when I'm going to catch a fish just there.
I already fished that one.
Yep. Oh, that's a better fish.
Shallow water. Yep. Got you in there.
In the weeds. Now that was a good illustration of another technique you can do with these squidgy spinnerbaits. See that little pile of weed right there? I threw the lure in, it landed about 6 inches from that patch of weed. I clicked my bail arm over, and that lure was just what we call helicoptering. The blade was just turning, that lure was falling vertically down through the water right next to that patch of weeds, and zoom, the line just took off and that fish was on the end. So that's just another technique for you. Always be aware that you may be bitten by a bass while you're helicoptering down. And these squidgy spins, absolutely sensational for helicoptering. That little blade hangs up there, helicopters away, the lure goes down like that, and he couldn't resist.
If you're fishing them deep, mate, you can actually count them down. They do half a metre a second.
It's handy to know, if you find a fish on the sounder, you'll know how deep it is, and you can count it down so that it goes right down where they are. I love this spinnerbait fishing.
Well, Bushy's been catching far too many fish on that gold spinnerbait of his, and unfortunately, I don't have another one left in the tackle box. But what I do have is a spinnerbait with a gold blade. And one of the beauties of the Squidgy spinnerbait range is that we can select any colour squidgy tail that we like, and we can fit it to the spinnerbait, providing it's the right size. So I do have some gold tails here in the tackle box, and you fit them onto the lure exactly as you would onto a normal jig head, with the one exception, and that is that you cut the front of the lure off just behind the moulded head of the tail like that. I'll take the green one off there, and now I'll simply replace it with the gold tail. Thread it on as you would normally, straight down the middle, and back out through the very top of the lure so it sits straight. I've got a gold lure to try and match him. Hopefully I'll be able to catch one now.
Yep.
He's got one, he got one, he got You're... Get him out of there! Get him out of there! You're unstoppable today, Bushy. Gold lure or no gold lure?
I can pull. I can tell you what.
I put my gold lure on and he puts the green one on and he still keeps catching them.
It mightn't be a big one, but it's a lively one. Well, unfortunately, we've run out of time here on Squidgy Secrets Part 2, Beyond the Basics.
But we hope you've enjoyed the show because we've certainly enjoyed making it for you.
And don't think you're going to get away that lightly, because next year we're going to bring out the Secrets of Squidgies Part 3.
Oh, I can't wait to learn those secrets. But we're not going yet. Hey, you're not going to beat me to the rest of these snags. Oh no!
Oh no!
See? Karma got you.
Water bassin in the sunset. Way to go.
Thank you, guys.
Well done. Well.